If you compare beer with bratwurst,
and cheese with wine,
or even whiskey,
with donuts,
then we think you can pair all of these delicious drinks with
murder,
conspiracies,
missing persons,
and more.
Drink with us as you feed your craving for true crime and creepy stories.
Hello, hello. I am Jason, and this is my beautiful wife, Katie. And, Katie, what do we have going for us today?
New Year's Day, 1959, an anti-American revolutionary named Fidel Castro seized power in Cuba after his overthrow of Fulgencio Batista. From that moment on, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States sought to destabilize Castro's regime, including several assassination schemes and attempts. These plans range from quasi-reasonable to downright unbelievable, some so ridiculous they are more likely to have been written as a subplot in a James Bond film or thought up by a pack of 8-year-old boys pretending to be spies. None of the CIA attempts would prove successful, leaving many to ask, how could one man from a tiny sugar-producing island escape efforts on behalf of what is believed to be one of the most talented intelligence agencies, representing the most powerful country in the world at the time? Well, once you hear some of the assassination plots actually designed by CIA officials to assassinate this man, you won't be left asking that question much longer.
That sounds awesome. Look, I know you've seen about 2 James Bond films your whole life.
Not even in their entirety.
Maybe one in its side. You've seen one. I know that for sure.
If Idris
and
Elba
you even
actually
admitted,
became James Bond, I would sign up to watch that film. But he gave
we
that up.
We were all hoping, and the
now I will
stupid
boycott
people over
forever.
there that are in charge of James Bond, they ruined it because they caught wind that they were just trying to use him.
No, Idris Elba goes, I'm not going to play James Bond because you want to make it about the color of my skin.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to do that. I just want to be James Bond.
They were going to use him.
And there
just
goes my last chance of being a James Bond
Literally,
fan.
the man would make one of the best James Bonds, and we wouldn't even know that he had a different skin color.
Oh, it's such
He
a
would have
bummer.
been so good. So good.
Yes.
That man is an incredible actor, and he literally is, I think, right now, England's best actor, and would have been
fantastic.
He would have epitomized what James Bond is. I'm glad you brought James Bond up, because and I was going to say, I know you haven't watched more than maybe one full James Bond film. I grew up loving James Bond. My dad really liked James Bond as well, and I think he was very happy. I was the only kid that was just like, yes, James Bond, give me more. And I think it was like around Thanksgiving, they would play every single James Bond on TBS, if I remember right. And he recorded every single one on VHS. So we had the full catalog. I have literally seen every James Bond outside of one really, really awful one. I think it was like
Was Halle Berry in it?
No. This is way before then. With an actor, I can't even remember his name, but the name of the movie was like In Her Majesty's Secret Service or something like that.
Ooh, saucy.
Yeah, but it was, and then there was a really weird one that actually had Woody Allen in it.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and it was like a comedy James Bond, which oddly enough was named Casino Royale.
Oh.
So I'm going to tie that in to our drink here. I'm also going to say Casino Royale has been actually redone with the man himself, Daniel Craig.
Yes.
It was done right.
The blonde James Bond, which was also a thing at the time.
Yeah.
Like to have a blonde James Bond.
And he brought like a real like person to it. Like he actually is
It wasn't a
rugged.
caricature
He gets hurt. He
of
gets
a Secret Service guy.
Yeah.
He was like an actual human being who happened to have the job, which I do appreciate.
He showed emotion.
Yeah.
You saw him bleed.
Right.
You saw him mess up. Like it was, he played it, I think, probably the way it should have been done from the beginning. Sean Connery, he's still in my mind James Bond. He's the man.
Well, I think he's going to show up in just a minute.
I've told you too much about what we're doing here.
I would have thought that the CIA was all that James Bond portrays, and very recently I've discovered that the CIA is not all of that. So
where
I'm going to jump into the basket that MI6 is where the party's at, because the CIA has let me down over and over and over.
I don't think that's the case. I bet if we look into MI6, we're going to see a lot of the same.
Did you just MI6?
I said MI6 really fast, and it kind of came out a little weird. I think we're going to see the same thing over there. But if you watch the old James Bond films, if you watch all of them, especially those goofy ones, but at the same time, all of them have some goofy things.
This episode is then all of the goofy moments from every James Bond film put into a podcast, but like the
it
thing
really
is
happened.
Actually, what happened in history.
But what's interesting is the guy who made it, Ian Fleming. I can't remember exactly now because it's been a while since I've looked at it. Probably should have brushed up on it before talking about it. But he has some sort of firsthand experience with MI6, and he was able to write on it from a knowledgeable point of view. So my guess is that everybody was kind of doing some goofy things.
Goodness gracious.
I hope they all have it buttoned up and better now. Who knows? Probably not. I mean, if you look at the state of the world, it's just it doesn't bode well for like looking at intelligence agencies and be like, yeah, they're probably smarter than all of us.
After another.
Anyway,
so I'm gonna pick. I think I know.
Yeah, pretty easy to know now that I've talked this much about it. We're going with the actual James Bond drink.
Oh, amazing.
Which I don't think a lot of people know has an actual name. There are actual ingredients. It's not just martini shaken, not stirred. This drink is called the Vesper. So a little bit about the drink. It was invented by the author of James Bond, Ian Fleming. They started as books, not just films. And it was obviously the drink for his iconic British secret agent, James Bond. The first time it appeared in one of his novels, it was the novel Casino Royale, which was published in 1953. The cocktail actually gets its name from fictional double agent, which those that have watched the actual Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, learns he falls in love with the lady. That lady's name is Vesper Lind. Now, in the book, Bond orders his signature drink from the bartender. He provides very specific instructions on how to make the drink. And he says this: a dry martini, 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of Canalette. Shake it very well until it's ice cold. Then add a large thin slice of lemon peel.
I told you guys Sean Connery would make an appearance.
That's probably as good as it's going to get without me practicing 100 times. So yeah, we're going to actually dip into this drink. I've never had it. I'm very interested.
I absolutely have never had a James Bond martini called Vesper.
I'm excited. I'm not a big martini fan. I've got a British friend that is a martini fan, and he's made some for me, and I think I should drink them more, but we'll see how this one is.
I will tell you this. So I think there is a difference between martinis that are shaken and martinis that are stirred. Shaking martinis absolutely tends to make a harsher sort of initial taste. So
isn't the thing behind that something about the ice bruises the
bruising the
right?
alcohol. And so we're going to drink some very bruised gin martinis. I'm here for it. I'm here for every minute of it.
I love it. As you could tell from my Connery instructions there's no dirtiness to this.
There's no olives. There's no blue cheese inside olives, which I think is the best part of any martini.
Oh, another thing. I don't know if I have it in my notes here, but I did read. So Bond at some point was also, he said something about when he has to work or he's on a case, he doesn't like to have more than one drink. So he has this one drink, and it's kind of his loophole to have a very large drink. I mean, really, this drink's like 3 drinks in one.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So I'll just warn you up front. Sip it. We're not diving in chugging this thing, because hopefully just one gets us through the whole thing.
I'll tell you, my research on the CIA says these guys would have chugged it. So perhaps you're going to sip, I'm going to chug, and I'm going to tell you the most crazy story about the CIA and their many ridiculous attempts at killing Fidel Castro.
I can't wait. So I'm going to go ahead and shake these bad boys. Not stir them.
Shake, senora.
Hopefully it doesn't pop out on me.
That's what he said.
Spill everywhere.
That's what he said.
So it's ice cold.
Yes. I have never made a martini like this in my entire life. So I'm very, very curious as to what it's supposed to taste like.
It smells like a martini.
Well, it's gin, which I think is a very distinct taste. And so when people would order gin martinis, their expectation was that it tasted like gin.
Yeah.
You know what? Because vodka can taste like a lot of different things.
Yeah, which I don't think the vodka is going to do a whole lot to the gin, but it's got to do a little bit. I don't know if I've ever had a drink that had gin and vodka.
We would like to note that we've poured it in previously chilled glasses, because martinis in cold glasses is very important.
Oh, that's true. Very true.
That was my contribution.
Good
Cheers.
Job. Cheers.
To taking over the world.
What are we going to do today, brain? Same thing we do every day.
Try and take over the world. Okay, so I enjoy that very much. But can we talk about how interesting the alcohol looks? It looks like there are millions of stars.
It really does.
It's bananas. And I don't know if that's like oxygen, because you shook it so hard.
Yeah, I like to shake.
It's a very clean tasting beverage.
Super clean. I am a fan. Mr. Bond, you have outdone yourself this time.
Yes, I enjoy that.
That's going to be hard just to sip. No, but I got him. Got to keep my wits about me, because you're going to share a bunch of information, I'm sure.
Well, an iconic drink ordered by the most famous intelligence agent of all time is perfectly paired with a story about numerous failed attempts that another intelligence agency had on the life of Fidel Castro.
Oh, good old Castro, huh?
Yes. Now, as the United States proved victorious in the Spanish-American War in 1898, Spanish colonial rule in the Americas came to an end. At the end of the war, Spain would give control of Cuba, along with other Caribbean islands like Puerto Rico, to the United States. 3 years later, Cuba would be given their independence, but as part of the deal to end the U.S. occupation, the American government would be guaranteed a say in Cuba's political affairs and Cuba was required to lease part of their territory to the United States government for use as a military base, Guantanamo Bay. These ties between Cuba and the United States would be tested and in the end come to an end when Cuba's government came under the leadership of Fidel Castro. While studying law at the University of Havana, Fidel Castro became very involved in the student protest movement. Later, Castro would attempt to overthrow the government, and as a result of this failed coup, Castro would be jailed.
What did he do to try and overthrow it?
Him and his homeboys just tried to overthrow it.
With
Violent
violence?
means.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes. While in jail, Castro would solidify his Marxist beliefs and his dedication to socialism. After his release from prison, Castro fled to Mexico, where he would join Che Guevara in creating the 26th of July movement, a group that would successfully overthrow the Cuban government in 1959, leading to Castro being named prime minister, and then in later years, him becoming president of Cuba.
No kidding.
Yes.
I didn't know Che was
they were
tied in with
they were homies.
the Cuban government, really.
Yeah, they were.
Huh.
Now, it was incredibly concerning to the United States government, first under President Eisenhower and then under President Kennedy, to have a socialist leader ruling a country so close in proximity to the United States, with the potential of influencing other Latin American countries to welcome socialism themselves. It was even more unnerving when Castro solidified trade agreements between Cuba and then Cold War enemy, the Soviet Union. Thus began the CIA operation codenamed Mongoose. The goal of Mongoose was to destabilize and remove Castro from power. A large part of Mongoose included plans to assassinate Fidel Castro, plans so secret that no more than 5 members of the CIA knew about them at the time.
Oh, wow. That is very secretive.
Now, these plans were detailed in a hearing done by the Church Committee in 1975, and here is what was revealed. As early as 1960, the CIA made attempts to sabotage Castro. They are going to focus on Castro's proclivity to give long speeches. Here's a fun fact. Castro actually owns the record for the longest speech given to the UN. Do you want to guess how long that speech was?
Longest speech. I'm pretty sure I'm aware of some pretty long ones. So I'd go with maybe a 3-4 hour mark.
4 hours and 29 minutes, and it was given in 1960.
Wow.
Now, the CIA strategized.
First of all, can you imagine sitting there and just be like, this guy's still fucking going?
Goodness gracious.
And only so many people can understand what he's saying. I'm guessing he's not speaking English.
No. So the CIA is going to strategize, and they develop a plan to spray the studio where Castro made his speeches from with a chemical that would have created hallucinations similar to those experienced while using LSD.
Wow. Was it delirium?
They didn't name it in this
I just ran across a
report.
documentary called Delirium, Dr. Delirium, and it was a CIA op where they created this new substance just like LSD.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were working on other things that were
I'm
like
just
that.
super curious. Like, what would that have looked like? Some guy in coveralls with like a giant like pack on his back, like spraying stuff in the studio.
Also, how do you get in there?
Oh, excuse me. I'm just fumigating for sand flies.
Yeah. Good old Lord Castro asked me to, get rid of the bugs in this room.
Well, that plan didn't work. So another plan the CIA
I wonder
had.
if they tripped though. I really like. They left after a speech and were just like, man, I feel weird.
I don't even think whatever spray made it in. And we're
I
going to talk
feel-
about what Castro did to like protect himself.
No.
Nobody's messing with Castro.
But even so, it probably, just like in our last episode about the CIA, where they wanted them to be weaker on interrogations, it made them stronger. It probably just
it
empowered.
probably was the best speech of his life.
It empowered him.
Because
And
he
was just
saw the
like, "I am more
capitalist monsters
convicted."
coming for him.
Yes.
He probably was so pumped
Yes.
up
He was
if
more-
the plan ever worked.
More convicted than he's ever been
Yes.
going forward. It was ayahuasca dream for him. Like, this is what I'm meant for in
He's
life.
sweating. He's pounding his fists. And they're just like, he is amazing.
And then he was just like nice to everybody, and they were just like, we're backing him even more.
Yes.
He's the man.
Now, the CIA also made attempts to spike Castro's cigars with the same chemical in order to disrupt Castro's long oratory performances.
Is that why they legalized Cuban cigars? They're like, we're not sure how much of those cigars we put this in.
You just wait. We're going to talk
We
about all
can't
these
have those
crazy
coming over here.
cigars that I feel bad for whoever wound up purchasing.
Oh my gosh.
Now, additionally, the CIA attempted to dust Castro's shoes with thallium salts, with the desired effect being it would cause Castro's beard to fall out. Now, what the ultimate goal was in having Castro's beard fall out, I have no idea. But can you imagine these CIA agents sitting in a room talking about this over a table? Like, and that's the best they come up with. Like, let's get some thallium salts.
Thallium? It's just thallium salt?
Yeah.
So it's something that makes your hair fall out.
Yes.
And that was
Going to be so detrimental to Castro
Did they
that
think
he
he was
could not
Samson from the Bible? Like, without his
I have
hair,
no
he has
idea.
no power.
I have zero faith in the CIA
Holy cow.
after this episode. Now,
But if there's only 5 of them, they're like, guys, I'm not the smartest one. Nor am I. Let's just do our best. They are
Thallium
relying on us.
salts.
We also have all this money to use. Let's
Now-
have some fun here.
all of those attempts failed, obviously.
Obviously.
The first plot developed as an attempt on Castro's actual life came at the tail end of Eisenhower's presidency, so it was sort of thought up in 1960. The CIA sought to exploit Castro's affinity for cigars yet again, but this time they intended to spike them with what the agency referred to as a miracle poison. The CIA laced cigars intended for Castro with botulinum toxin, which was so strong it would have killed anyone who put it in their mouth. And in case you are wondering, botulinum is a neurotoxin which causes muscle paralysis. And I'm assuming it would cause paralysis of his throat, his lungs, his chest, and he would cease to breathe.
It'd be an awful way to go out.
Now, these cigars were delivered to Cuba in 1961 by an unidentified person, but what happened to the poisoned cigars after that point is unclear. What is clear is the cigars never actually made it to Castro's mouth. Whose mouth they made it to, I have no idea. But some poor sucker on vacation trying to smoke a Cuban cigar went out in a terrible, terrible way.
Look, already, I mean, from what we know from the other episode about CIA and already what you've told us in 10 minutes, dude probably has total idea that the U.S. are trying to kill him. So at the very least, he's probably not taking. Also, I mean, he can make his own cigars.
What's the story about the king who has somebody else taste his
And
food?
that's what I was gonna say. Is he's got.
This is my cigar moistener.
Well, we know because in the Bible, Joseph knows one of the people that tastes his food because he's imprisoned with them. So the pharaohs had people that would taste the food before, but that's a very well-known thing that kings had somebody try the food before.
Wow,
them.
I'm sure somebody was pre-smoking his
Yeah,
cigars.
yeah. It's just like, hey, we got this box of cigars as a gift to you, and that you are going to just do wondrous things in the world. And
Great.
Fidel's
My
like,
cousin.
hey,
Jesus is going to try this one.
I know. I'm like, Cuban names, Spanish names. Yeah, Jesus, come over here.
Oh.
Sacrificial lamb, come over here and smoke the cigar. It's like, Jesus, thank you for your sacrifice.
Somebody absolutely bit the dust on that one, I'm sure.
Or they just weren't smoking cigars from other people.
Possibly.
And he was just like, we got the best cigars here.
Correct.
I don't need to smoke anybody else's.
Yeah, they were probably wrapped in
they
some like American
just threw
foil.
them right in the trash right away.
Hey.
Just like, we don't need those.
Plot foiled, CIA, plot foiled. Boy. Then in 1961, as President John F. Kennedy took office, Operation Mongoose officially was underway.
You know what's interesting? I was thinking about the name Mongoose. Like, why would they name it that? And I was like, what do mongooses
kill snakes.
They kill snakes, so they eat snakes. It's like one of the rare animals that can actually catch a snake and eat it.
And
so
not just a snake, it's a big snake.
Oh,
it's a king cobra.
Yeah, they can.
I think that's
it's all sorts of snakes, but there's not many that can get away from them.
We can cut this out, but I never watched cartoons as a kid. But there was one cartoon I watched about a mongoose who killed a king cobra for this kid that he worked for or whatever. And there was like a chant to it that was like Ricky Tiki Tiki Tombo or something. And like that is something that is like solidified in my brain.
I feel like I've heard that song or phrase, Ricky Tiki.
It is a very sort of strange cartoon to watch as a kid, but we're cutting this out.
No, we aren't, because it sounds like you were a little brainwashed. Like that sounds like one of those cartoons you indoctrinate.
I want everybody to go Google it on YouTube
by your description.
And it's a mongoose taking on this king cobra, and I think the CIA thought of themselves as the mongoose.
I feel like I've heard that song. Maybe it was
famous.
They didn't. Maybe
they were not the mongoose.
Yeah, but anyway, it's an interesting name. I thought it's a clever name. That's the only thing clever they've come up with so far.
You just wait. They get creative.
The mongoose finds the snake in the grass, and Fidel Castro is the snake in the grass who's going to ruin the whole world.
Because this whole story makes communism seem cool, and at no point do we think communism is cool. But the CIA definitely shat the bed to this whole situation.
Communism is not cool.
All right, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. What were we going to talk about mongooses?
I said it like it's a cool name because the snakes.
Yeah.
Snake in the grass. They find them to get rid of them.
Well,
they get
rid CIA didn't.
The snake took down the whole world in the beginning of the word.
So many biblical references from you today.
I don't know what it is. Anyway, I digress.
So during phase 1 of Mongoose, the CIA decided that they could use members of the mafia here in the United States who had gambling interests in Cuba. This plan would be given the code name Family Jewels. I'm not even lying. It's true. Now, 2 gangsters, Sam Giancana, who at the time was the boss of the Chicago mob, and Santos Traficante, the head of the mob's Cuban operations, were enlisted to help the CIA. Dang. At that time, both of those men were on the FBI's most wanted list.
Of course they were. Yeah.
Now, the CIA would pay $150,000, which is equivalent to $1.2 million today.
Holy shit.
To have these mafia members simply arrange delivery of poisonous pills to someone in Cuba who had access to Castro. For this plan, a total of 6 poisoned pills were developed. The first 3 pills arrived in Cuba in either February or March of 1961 and were set to be delivered to a Cuban official who was in need of some money and who happened to have access to Castro. Once it was clear that the first attempt with the poisoned pills had failed, this Cuban official, getting cold feet, never actually even attempted to give Castro a poisoned pill. The second 3 poisoned pills were delivered in either March or April of 1961. The plan for the second set of pills was slightly different. This time, the pills would be given to someone who worked at a restaurant, often visited by Castro, and there they could be slipped into Castro's entree or his drink. However, it seemed that after the pills arrived on location at the restaurant, Castro simply stopped visiting the restaurant altogether.
Oh, somebody told him.
Yes. Castro was so much better at this game than the CIA was.
Also, Castro probably went to these mafia guys and was like, oh, I'll give you $250,000.
No, see, I don't even I think the mafia guys just worked as like a middleman. I found somebody, I will get the pills there, and that will
Then
be the
that
end.
somebody...
Nobody in Cuba was going to act against Castro.
Exactly.
That is something I have concluded.
That was my biggest question with, they're dropping it off to somebody they knew who had access. Like,
it was so absurd.
You're just handing, like, Fidel's just like, yeah, give it to that guy. He'll take care of it.
It's
like
ridiculous.
Fidel's telling them who to give it to.
Okay, wait for this. Now, the CIA also enlisted one of Castro's mistresses, a woman named Marita Lorenz, to deliver poisoned pills to Castro. Marita was given 2 botulism toxin pills, and the plan was for her to drop them into Castro's drink. For safekeeping, Marita hid the pills in a jar of cold cream. But in placing them in this jar, the pills became gunky and completely unusable.
She's like, where'd they go?
Gosh, Marita.
I tried to fish them out. It just stirred it up more in there.
Now,
botulism on my fingers.
According to Marita, Castro suspected her of these nefarious intentions. And in response to her disloyalty one night, Castro took out his own pistol and handed it to her. Then, almost taunting her to shoot him, he stated, "Nobody can kill me." Then, according to Marita, the two made love. So if you need a storyline for the next James Bond film, Marita Lorenz should be a character in your film.
That's such a sweet story.
It's ridiculous.
That's
and then later that night, somehow she put all this poisonous cream on her face and never awoke. That's not true. I added that.
That would be the way to go. He's like, which jar did you put in?
All right, Marita, you lay there.
All right. Go ahead and use that stuff.
Seriously. Anyway, she lived to tell the tale, so I'm assuming Castro let her live.
That's a sweet story. It's romantic.
Gosh. Now, in April 1961, another attempt to overthrow Castro involving the United States took place. This event is now referred to as the Bay of Pigs. It would take 2 days for Cuban armed forces to defeat the group of Cuban exiles who arrived on Cuba's southwestern coast at the Bahia de Cochinos, the Bay of Pigs, intending to invade and overthrow the government. Now, this group of Cuban exiles had been trained by the CIA, and the operation was funded and directed by the U.S. government. The Bay of Pigs, to this day, is still considered one of the most tragic failures of the U.S. government, despite originally the CIA claiming that they were not involved.
I wonder if that tragic failure ranks up there with training Al-Qaeda.
So many things.
And then, supposedly 2 buildings came down from Al-Qaeda, and,
there's so many
go
things.
over there and beat those guys up after we trained them.
Once a month, we're just going to do an episode about how embarrassing the CIA is.
I love it. We got to throw FBI in there, too, because FBI has some...
Yes, but I've met actual FBI agents, and I feel like they're closer than the CIA, and it makes me a little nervous. Now, okay, so under phase 2 of Mongoose, which spanned 1962 into 1963, the CIA decided that they would try to use Castro's love of scuba diving against him.
He was a scuba diver, eh?
Yeah, he was.
I don't see him doing that. No.
I love that for him, though.
Yeah, I do, too. Like, that just makes him more personable.
Yes, well...
We're slowly becoming communists.
No,
We got to be
never.
careful. We got to be careful.
I was slightly socialist while in college, and then I saw the light. We
feel
will
like
never be communists.
You didn't fully understand. Well,
No.
also, no.
But this story makes you just kind of go, okay, Fidel, touche. You did your thing.
Also, she's joking. CIA, she never was socialist.
Never.
We know you're listening. Because we hashtag CIA on everything.
They get the most reels, which is partially why I chose to do, or the most views on a reel. All right. Now, the CIA's first plan involved hiding explosives in a large seashell, which they planned on painting with exotic colors so that this shell would draw the attention of Castro while he swam in the ocean. However, the CIA quickly determined that there were no shells in the Caribbean that were large enough to hide an adequate amount of explosives in, nor were there any naturally spectacular shells, so that their booby-trapped painted seashell would seem reasonable.
What?
I'm not lying to you.
They put this shit down in writing?
Yes.
That is a thought somebody needs to, especially as a grown adult.
It comes from an intelligence report that I read.
As a grown adult, I don't care what your profession is, you keep that to yourself. Or you tell it to your kid, and then they can take it and play their own play world with it.
No,
because that is some fake ass, not real world reality stuff to try.
Can I tell you, this is how much I love this plan? Like, it literally got to the point where they were going to like implement it. But then the CIA realized that they would need to use what they called a midget submarine to place the booby-trapped shell where Castro could access it. And at the time, they did not have one with a long enough operating range.
No.
So it was discarded.
So they've got small people on hand. They're just like,
no, the submarine
none of
is
these
midget.
guys work.
No, but I feel like they already had this
range.
ridiculous sparkly shell that was too large to be an actual shell. And they're just like pushing through. And then they're like, we have no way to put it in the ocean because our midget submarines don't work that far off. And also, so they were like,
imagine like A to Z from this. They come up with the idea. So then you got to come up with the prototype.
Which was somebody's home project with paper mache.
Yeah. And then somebody actually makes it like, legit, real looking shell.
It's the size of a Volkswagen. It's absurd.
And they're all looking at it like, they're not going to fall for this. And they still push it a little bit.
Just like, until the midget submarine wouldn't work.
How could...
And then I picture this midget submarine dragging...
Wait, it's a midget submarine
it's
on
a tiny
midget
submarine.
Person?
No.
Oh,
But then I literally picture this tiny submarine dragging this giant like seashell towards the island of Cuba, and it just slowly starts to like slow down because they lose like their remote control, and they're just like, and it's just like beep, beep. It's slowing. Beep, beep. No, it's slowing. It's not going to work anymore. And that was the end of the seashell.
It would have been the first tale of the submarine story we had for the Titanic. Like, we don't know what happened to it.
And then it just sitting at the bottom of the ocean.
Nobody would have heard about it
because the CIA would have been like, rainbow seashell.
Cross that off our list.
And that's it. Well, we're not done with trying to capitalize on his desire to scuba dive. Next, the CIA thought that they could use a man who at the time was responsible for negotiating with Castro for the release of prisoners taken at the Bay of Pigs. The CIA planned for General Donovan, who was the negotiator, to give Castro a new scuba suit. It was the CIA's plan that this suit would be contaminated with a fungus that would give Castro a chronic and debilitating skin disease. They also intended to poison the breathing apparatus with tuberculosis bacilli. However, the CIA didn't bother telling General Donovan of their plan, so as a gesture of friendship, Donovan, on his own accord, gifted Castro with another non-deadly scuba suit. This is my favorite episode.
This is an episode.
I've never gotten this response from my husband in anything I've ever told him.
So
including MK Ultra.
We haven't fully given up on video, but we've taken a break on it because it's a pain in the ass. I don't have computers that are right for it. Anyway, this is the episode we need it for because you're like laughing at my expressions, and I hear you laughing while you're telling.
So out of control.
I don't have words for the last one. I'm still stuck on the midgets or a midget submarine bring a fucking gigantic, non-realistic seashell somewhere, and I don't even know what was going to come out of the seashell because I was so hung up on like
explosives.
Okay.
Okay.
But you know what's funny?
All of it.
All of it. But I'm telling you, these old James Bond films
That's
have
exactly what they
stupid
would
shit
do.
like this in it. It really does.
know.
Like stupid stuff. Like the vehicles that James Bond like drives to try and make something happen. I mean, he's got vehicles that can like ice skate, that can he comes down mountains on a cello, like
Well,
uses it
apparently
as
that's
a
what these
sled.
agents were watching.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, as the Phase 2 plans proved to be a bust, obviously, Mongoose entered into Phase 3, which spanned the rest of 1963 into 1965. For Phase 3, the CIA planned on working with a Cuban contact who was in a relatively high governmental position in Cuba, according to page 61 of a 91-page intelligence report, which chronicled assassination attempts made by the United States government on various individuals. Now, page 62 of this report was completely redacted. And so for a moment, I'd like to take us on a little bit of a tangent and read the beginning of page 63 before we get back on track discussing another attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro.
You know, I love my tangents.
I know, I almost called it a squirrel, but I think this one is really, really important.
Perfect.
So
it's a rabbit hole then.
Yes. So this is what the top of page 63 states, and I quote, "Although the agency did not develop such a device," and then it's going to go on to say some other things. I'm assuming they are alluding to the description of a device that would have occurred on page 62 had it not have been redacted. So what was that device? And why is it so important to redact it if the agency doesn't currently have such a device at their hands?
My eyebrows are raised. Also, what if they do have the device?
That's what I'm saying.
I would say that, yeah.
It wasn't
The fact
utilized against Fidel Castro because they were like,
fact
you know
that
what?
they
He's
have
just the
it is
Cuban
the reason
dictator.
to get rid of it.
And so they redacted all.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would have just been like a device that is a gigantic.
Yeah, it's definitely not a seashell.
Nut from a tree
Right?
that can explode.
That's what I'm saying. So what the
But no
heck?
nuts actually exist like that. And
I
we couldn't
know.
do it.
And I got real nervous, but then
What
I'm
if
gonna.
they did all this other extra stuff to hide the real thing that they were able to make, and then they decided not to use it?
I don't even think they did all this extra stuff. I think one of them had a really good idea, and they're like, "We're gonna save this for somebody who actually
matters.
really matters."
Also, tell me this: you read that 91
Yes, I did.
thing, right? I remember you
Oh,
spending a lot of time reading, and
these
just
people
kinda,
get paid
like,
too much money
out of
to
nowhere.
say
You're like,
a ton
I'm
of words to say
reading a
nothing.
91-page document about assassinations attempted. There's a couple things in my mind, and I might be getting too ahead of myself. Save it towards the end, but you know what? If I save it towards the end, I'll forget. And one is assassinations seem to be way harder than they actually, like, kind of to us common man sort of seem like, because we know that there was assassination attempts on Hitler. I think that movie Valkyrie is about that with Tom Cruise. And there's some other documentation of the United States trying to do some stuff there. And also British intelligence. Never happened, obviously. We see all these other leaders that are wreaking havoc on their nations and having effects on the world. None of them are being assassinated, probably being tried to be assassinated.
Yes.
What's crazy is how easy it might be to assassinate your own.
So that's something I
Because
allude
that's
to
our main thing.
very later in the podcast, but it's
Okay.
this idea that Like, there is a notion on the global stage that countries have sovereignty and their rulers get to make decisions for their countries. And so if another country is going to act to remove somebody in power, not war times, it has to be done through covert means. So you get the most ridiculous, at least on behalf of the CIA, methods to try to assassinate another country's leader through covert means so it can't come back and be tied.
Come back to you. Yeah.
And that's the thing is, while all of this ridiculousness is being thought of by the CIA, there are members of Cuba's own population who, under a communist rule, are suffering, and they absolutely are attempting to kill him through more obvious, like, direct means,
right.
Gunfire, weapons. Right. And so I think that's where things get a little wonky. If you're not at war with a country, then you technically don't have a right to remove their leader from power.
True. What's crazy is, come on. I mean, we kind of know at this point.
I mean, Saddam Hussein was an enemy of the United States, and until we declared the war in Iraq, he could not be removed from power, despite the fact that he allegedly was behind an assassination attempt of the first President Bush.
Yeah. But
because there are implications to covert acts against leaders of foreign nations. What
I was going to say is the most successful assassination that we've heard done by, and I think it was the FBI on this, but either way, an intelligence agency here in the United States was carried out on its own president, and that's JFK.
Oh, well, we can save that for another episode because he's going to show up in just a minute.
I'm his death is going to show up in a minute. Into that on another episode. But so that's my point is, like, we haven't heard of any success. We don't even know of, like, any other assassination that could have even been carried out by us because there's not many assassinations actually carried out. Yeah. Now, maybe there is here and there little ones, but there's no one to the name of Fidel Castro of that status that has been brought dead, and anybody could even been like,
right.
What if the CIA somehow created some sort of powder to put into his cigars? And then it's like conspiracy theory on that, which is great. Like, also conspiracy theories maybe have a little more credence to what these guys are thinking. Anyway, I think assassinations are super hard to carry out. I think they probably are best when you just pin it on, somebody actually in the government.
Or you use a member of the own population
and pin it on them. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And so, I just, it's crazy to me how...
Well, we're not done. We're not done.
I am so excited to hear
So
more,
I got super unnerved
so
by this, like, secret weapon, and then I read what they actually were able to produce, and I got less nervous. So page 63 of this report goes on to state, although the agency did not develop whatever device is described on page 62, they were successful in creating a ballpoint pen capable of containing a hypodermic needle. And once a lever on the pen was pushed, the needle would extend out. And then the needle could potentially be used to inject poison into Castro.
That is literally straight from James Bond.
It's also like if you're going to be close enough to push a lever on a ballpoint pen to get a needle into Castro, you probably could just use the needle.
Yeah, but these devices... Katie, you haven't watched enough, but every single James Bond film, he visits a man
in a basement somewhere, probably.
It's kind of like, it's usually a basement, but sometimes it's not. Like, sometimes you see out the windows. Anyway, I'm trying to remember his name. It's not M. M is the
lady. Mastermind. Well, she becomes a lady later on.
Yeah, because it's Voldemort later. What the hell is his name?
It's okay.
Anyway, I'll think of it later. He goes to him. It's a scientist. He's creating these devices, and it's weird devices. Like, Now here's a ballpoint pen, and you click it twice to get the hyperdemic needle. Click it once, and it's a normal pen, so nobody knows you
Click
have
it 3 times, and you have red ink.
Click it 4 times, and it explodes in your hand. That's like, don't do that.
Okay. Well,
or tell somebody to do it that you hand it to. And that happens in James Bond. Anyway, like literally.
I completely believe it. Now, this device was given to the Cuban contact on November 22nd, 1963, but the contact would claim that since the device required such a close proximity with Castro, he was unwilling to use it. Now, he also could have gotten cold feet, considering that literally was the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. And with the political climate in the United States being in such a state, he quite possibly could have been concerned about his future protection had he been able to assassinate Castro.
Well, yeah. Yeah,
Now,
you'd be concerned. Like, they just killed him.
Yes. Now, on an ironic note, there were several high-ranking officials in government who legitimately believed Kennedy's assassination was the result of orders given by Fidel Castro himself.
Really?
Yes. It was a whole thing.
What if he infiltrated our own CIA?
No, when I read Legacy of Ashes, which is the
ideas.
history of the CIA, like that is absolutely a turning point in what the CIA was. Because they legitimately believed that, like, Fidel Castro was able to accomplish what the assassination of the president of the United States.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. And maybe you don't know enough about it, but there's a lot, like, especially with the papers that came out. I don't know. I think it was a year, 2 years ago about FBI's
I
papers.
can't wait to dive into that. I've never dived into it.
You haven't?
No.
Isn't it thought that it's the FBI behind it, not the CIA? Or is it the CIA, not the FBI?
I think it's the CIA.
You think it's CIA?
There's this whole theory
Because of
about
the
how
communist
intelligence agent... Okay, I didn't plan on talking about this because
well,
I feel
have
like
to throw something at you every now and then that you can react to.
So here's why there's a theory that the CIA was responsible for a CIA branch not connected to any of this that's happening. So Kennedy was at the helm in terms of leadership during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah. And I don't think people realize how absolutely close the United States was to all-out military conflict with the Soviet Union because of the decisions Kennedy made. And so there's an entire theory that the CIA thought it best for Kennedy to be removed from power simply to protect the interests of the United States because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which I didn't talk about. It happened in 1963 and absolutely was a turning point for the relationship between the United States and Cuba, and eventually the missiles were removed from Cuba in exchange for certain missiles to be removed from Turkey. So, like, the U.S. got some security, the Soviet Union got some security, but the CIA felt that Kennedy, who had a whole host of physical, mental issues, he was on so many drugs just dealing with back pain, and he had been compromised by the mafia in terms of Marilyn Monroe and all of this stuff, that the CIA thought it best to remove him. But what I've learned is that intelligence agencies and parts of intelligence agencies don't communicate with each other. Yeah. So what this part of the CIA knew isn't what the other parts of the CIA knew, which isn't anything that the FBI knew, and they all just act independently, and we should all be terrified.
Which in that last CIA episode, which... let's just continue doing CIA episodes.
No,
not every episode, but like once a month. Let's dive into it.
Fascinating.
Super fascinating. We did kind of see that split of like a sector that didn't know, and then if anybody's interested, watch a movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yes.
Literally
super entertaining and super just eye-opening.
And it happened. Like, that actually was a real thing.
Yeah,
that
and
happened.
nobody knows, which is why
and
I want to tell
LSD
stories about the CIA.
Yeah.
Because nobody even knows.
But at the same time, there's part of me, I'm like thinking of how I want to choose my words here. There is part of me that I'm
Go on.
not glad, but kind of glad that there's somebody.
I had a gurgle.
I'm giving you a chance to drink your drink.
I'm gonna beat you to it.
I know, I
which
think you
never
already did.
happens.
There is a group that's willing just to test all these things, no matter how like obscure and weird and off the charts. That what if they do stumble on something that's just like
They literally remind me of the
crazy,
GT
weird
kids
shit
at school who like just take everything to the extreme, but one of them is going to stumble on something.
Yeah. 99.9% of it is going to end up being
Garbage.
But what if?
Okay. So now this contact would say, although he was unwilling to use the ballpoint hypodermic needle pen, he was willing to act in another way if he were to receive weapons for his use down in Cuba. So a stash of weapons was delivered to Cuba. Then, in March 1966, a Cuban leader was arrested in Cuba, and this man would claim that he received rifles with telescopic sights from the CIA, as well as $100,000 as payment for using the rifles to assassinate Castro.
There you go. So when I went on my tangent before on like, why are they coming up with these ideas? And I said some ridiculous stuff.
They literally were just like, give him guns.
My second point was, why don't you just try and shoot him?
Yes, well.
Go old-fashioned style and snipe him out. Also, we have trained snipers.
That's covert.
No,
it's overt. We need covert actions.
I know. But at the same time, we know because of all the stories of these snipers.
They could have handled
There's movies
Castro.
made out of them, out of like
Which
the
makes me wonder why
skills
they
these
didn't.
snipers have. Literally covert. No idea where that bullet came from.
You know, Jess is listening to us talk over each other right now, going, stop talking over each other.
Oh, dang. Yeah.
Sorry, Jess.
Sorry, Jess. We'll do
Now,
better.
the CIA's official stance was that there was no truth to what this man was saying, and that this specific Cuban leader had simply been recruited by the CIA to collect intelligence on Cuba's military activities and their objectives. Now, it is important to note that the CIA's mission is to act covertly, which is why they simply did not go in with armed forces to assassinate the Cuban president, who literally had turned Cuba into a single political party communist country.
With quotations around that, like single party.
No, he literally declared it as such.
Well, yeah, but the people were not.
No, none
singularity,
of it.
Just like, this is the king. We all love him.
They never are.
Never.
Now,
that doesn't work.
And as the CIA tried to work behind the scenes, there were many more overt actions taken, probably with the support of CIA operatives, to remove Castro from power.
All right, we got some overt things coming.
No, we're not
thought
going
you
to talk
said
about
there were-
them.
Oh, really?
I'm just saying they
Dang it.
happened. I'm talking about the CIA. This isn't a history lesson.
All right.
You have to pay me something to talk about history. Not much, but something. So
Yeah, not much.
in 2006, Fabian Escalante, who is the former chief of Cuba's counterintelligence, stated that there had been 634 assassination plots or attempts on Castro's life. Not all on behalf of the CIA, but all of which had failed. But when you consider the lengths Castro went to guarantee his own safety, an exploding seashell and poisoned cigars stood zero chance. Once in power, Castro created intelligence and security services both within and separate of the armed forces. The armed forces, by the way, were controlled by his own brother, Raul Castro.
Raul.
So it's not like they're going to turn on him.
Oh, yeah.
And when Castro would travel, he would surround himself with hundreds of elite security and staff members.
I'm telling you, if they were on an island, this dude might have been next Hitler.
I don't even know.
He's on it.
Well,
On it. But the whole fact that he created
just
his own
knew.
intelligence agencies, he obviously he knew like people were going to come after him.
He was
probably
the
had no
snake,
way.
and he was the mongoose.
Exactly.
Like-
And he probably had no idea it was coming with full force as it was. But it probably just like he set up these, they're like, we stopped this today. We stopped it. And he's like, what the fuck?
Well,
We need to bolster this up.
as recent as the year 2000, those security measures were absolutely justified.
Yeah.
This James Bond drink has officially taken me.
Well, it'll
That
do that.
year, 200 pounds of high explosives were discovered under a podium in Panama where Castro was set to give a speech.
200 pounds?
Yeah, bigger than could fit in a seashell. It will fit in a podium.
Not
though.
quite atomic bomb, but it'll blow up a whole lot of men.
I know. Now, what the CIA could not accomplish, time and old age would. In 2008, Castro would step down as president of Cuba due to health issues. And then in 2016, at the age of 90,
Oh,
Castro would die of natural causes.
what if, now hear me out.
We're just biding time. No.
Some of those chemicals the CIA threw into a studio
At
or
90,
something
no.
finally like took effect. And they're like, he's old enough that this could be natural old age.
Absolutely
What if
not.
they didn't do that and he lives to like 110?
What's more likely is this, like the CIA goes, the sun has deprived Castro his longevity, and we are
Too much
responsible for
time
the
in the sun without sunscreen. And we gave him a message saying,
CIA, you don't
don't
get
use
credit."
sunscreen. Don't use it.
No,
There's
the
chemicals
CIA
in that
gets zero
sunscreen.
credit for any of it.
Yeah, I would
None.
have thought. That's crazy. I honestly,
90 years old.
I don't think it, I mean,
He outlived Kennedy. Guarantee he outlived Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Like I guarantee you he outlived all the people who were trying to bring about his ultimate downfall.
I think we grew up in an age where Fidel Castro was just kind of a name of the past. You know, it had heavy implications. He was still in charge, but there really wasn't. There was not.
Nobody really cared when we were growing up what Fidel Castro was
the
doing.
Cold War was gone.
Nobody
there
cared,
was
yeah.
like we knew communism wasn't going to take over our country.
Correct.
Little did
Now
we know
we're not
that.
so sure, but
Little did we know it was like eating away like a fucking bad disease.
no, but I think it does speak to
But
like human tendencies.
I think because of that, I didn't give much thought to Fidel Castro, and I remember hearing like, oh, he died. He was he was 90 years old, and that even like added to the whole. Oh, Fidel Castro, like, man, that is a long time ago. He was 90 when he died, and he wasn't even in power anymore. I don't think I've really even.
No,
this
but
is
maybe
the most
American
I've learned about
politicians
him.
could take a cue from a man who wanted to be dictator forever. At some point, you should step down. Like, he lived another 8 years, and he still chose to, like, I'm going to let somebody else take over.
Right.
So, Nancy Pelosi.
So, lady, what's her name over there in California?
Pelosi.
No, the one that lived.
No,
like,
she literally
died in
died.
Congress, right? Like,
Yes. She had given her
daughter had to make a decision. Well, she had to make her decision.
but not in Congress.
Yeah.
Let's just listen to Washington. We need new ideas and young people.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Even Castro knew it in 2008.
Term limits.
Okay. We're going to refocus.
Refocus.
Now, the official motto of Cuba is Patria o Muerte, which has its origins in a speech made by Fidel Castro himself. Its meaning, homeland or death. And it is clear that as far as Castro is concerned, the death part might as well have been hyperbole. Nothing was going to cause his death. No exploding cigars, which is literally a plot for Castro's visit to the UN, which we did not discuss, or fungus-filled scuba suits, or basically any plan that the CIA could concoct would make the muerte part reality. Now, as a result of the 1975 Church Committee, President Gerald Ford would issue an executive order to ban assassinations. However, this order and the 2 subsequent presidential orders that followed dealing with assassinations never actually define the term assassination. So technically, the word can be interpreted in a variety of ways, depending on the administration that is currently serving. So because we can't define assassinate, I'm assuming world leaders who happen to be enemies of the United States must sleep a little less easily tonight and every night. Obviously, I'm sure always on the lookout for funny tasting cigars or large colorful seashells. They will have to live daily, utterly suspicious of gifted scuba gear, or carrying the burden of never being able to trust people who carelessly wield ballpoint pens. And all I have to say is this: well done, CIA. A job well done.
Hey, amigo. You see that big ass seashell out there? Go grab that really quick. Bring it up here. I've never seen anything like that.
And
Wait, you say it's ticking?
tick,
No.
tick.
Bring it up here. I mean, that's weird. It might be worth something. Bring it up.
And that is how the United States destroyed communism.